Okay, this is probably so weird. You're probably like, wait, in recent reads, didn't you just end the same outfit? So I'm literally wearing the same shirt in 3 videos because I'm sitting in front of the camera and I'm like, I'm just going to get it done now, because once I get from behind this camera, the first thing I'm going to do is I need to work out. I really have not been working out at all, like not really getting any physical activity in the past few weeks. There's just been a lot going on in my life that has not, it's still good stuff, y'all, but some of the stuff is also not, let's be real, all of it's not good. And so I've been struggling a little bit these past few weeks with some things. It hasn't been like, let me clarify, it hasn't been like overshadowing, like, oh, like I'm miserable, this is awful. It's nothing like that. It is essentially the fact that it's a little bit of stress that's been added, and so trying to work through that stress, and I have not been doing a good job in terms of like my eating routine and regimen. I haven't been doing a good job with that. I also have not been doing good with physical activity, and the physical activity for me really helps with my stress management. So as soon as I get off of here, like, I'm literally changing my clothes and I'm about to do some form of physical activity. I'm going to start slow because I don't want to overexert my body, and because I haven't been doing it for a couple of weeks. It's been awful. I haven't been doing it. I was going like every day, and then life kind of went topsy-turvy. And so, but we're about to get back into it so I can start feeling fresh and fun again. So what am I currently reading? I literally just filmed my August reading plans video. So some of the stuff I talked about in that video I can also technically talk about here, because it's stuff that I'm probably going to finish in this recent reads video, which is fun. And these are never going to go up. I don't think these are ever going to go up, right? So like this one technically is not going to go up until, because I have one going up on Thursday of this week. So this one probably won't go up until Thursday of next week. So it's just, you know, it's always a week behind, which is fine. It's not a big deal. It's kind of whatever. But I think because of September, I think somehow, some way I might get back on track. And if I don't, then I don't. It's like I said, it's whatever. So the things that I'm currently reading, that I'm in the middle of, what I'm seriously reading, because there's some stuff that I started. So like in that video, I kind of talked about how I had started, what is this book? Woman of Light. I'd started that. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick up much more of that this week. I'm not completely sure that it's going to be a thing. I also started A Taste of Magic. Don't know how much of that I'm going to pick up this week. If I'm thinking in terms of this week and what I'm going to pick up, the 2 things that I'm probably going to end up reading tonight, and I keep looking around like maybe I'm leaving something out, because I have a tendency to do that, but I don't think I'm going to leave anything out. So here are 3 things that I know I at least want to work on this evening, because we're going to start small here. We're going to start really small here. My plan this evening, after I get finished working out, is to finish Zom 100 Volume 2. This volume is literally, it takes place like right after Volume 1, clearly. Not, I mean, timeline-wise, like it feels like it's like the day after the first day of Volume 1. And so we're still following Akira and his best friend, and they're hanging out, and he finds out that he wants to cross another thing off of his list, which is to wine and dine a flight attendant. And they ironically just happen to meet some flight attendants. How convenient is that? So they meet some flight attendants and things just go left. Like completely left. I can see why people don't really care for the series. I mean, it's okay to me. Like, I think parts of it are just like childish but funny also, but this is not one that I think I will end up collecting for my personal collection, and this is why I'm checking it out from the library. And so I don't think I'm gonna, you know, I don't see myself dropping it just yet, but I'm going to finish this volume up tonight, hopefully. I also want to go ahead and finish the second book in the Bad Guy series. This is their next rescue mission, and it is hilarious. So in this one, they end up partnering with a spider, and the shark is like so freaking scared of this spider, y'all. And the wolf is like, yo, bro, like, seriously? You're a whole shark and you're scared of a spider? And like, there's this page in here where the shark is literally melting. And it has to do with them, like, freeing some chickens from a chicken farm. I don't know if y'all be able to see this panel. I don't know if that's focused or not. I'm hoping it's focused. But the shark is literally falling apart because he's so scared of the spider. And so it was funny. Like, I started reading this last night and thought it was hilarious. So finish up that one. Hopefully I will finish these two this evening. And what I would like to start, not finish, because this series is text heavy. It is super text heavy. That's Dr. Stone Volume 3. I do own Volume 2 of Dr. Stone, and I had dropped collecting it because I was like, you know, I don't know if I'm gonna like this enough to continue collecting. It literally is about a group of teens who are essentially restarting civilization because there was this cataclysmic event and everyone turns into stone. And so this guy is like a science prodigy, and so he can pretty much figure a host of things out. And the last time I read this, they were in conflict with another guy where it was kind of like survival of the fittest type of vibes going on. But it is text heavy. I like the science elements, which is surprising because I'm not a science person, but I know that I want to start it, but I'm not going to finish it. There's no way I'm going to finish it. So these three things are on my radar for right now, and then I will figure out what else I want to do. In terms of audio, I started listening to two things. The first one, I don't really know because I started listening to it. I listen to audiobooks to help me go to sleep at night. And so I started listening to Nura and the Immortal Palace by M.T. Khan, and I don't know anything about it. Like, I started listening to it when I went to sleep, and the only part that I got to is that she's in a mine, and that's it. That's all I know. But the second thing that I actually was listening to while I was up awake is cults. I'm about 20% into this one. It is Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Join Them. So this follows, it's broken down into a series of chapters that follows the cult leaders, and the first one was about Charles Manson and the family, which that one was interesting. There were some things, like, I'm familiar with the whole story behind them, but there were some elements that I did not know about Manson and the family, so that was kind of new for me. I am on Aldofa. What is his name? Let me stop. I'm gonna stop butchering this man's name up. It's okay that I feel like, and maybe I'm struggling with this, I feel like the title of this book is misleading because it says that it's about the world's most notorious groups and understanding the people who join them. It's not really an analysis of the people who join them. These are biographical stories of the leaders of these cults and information about the people who have gotten wrapped up into them, but it's not really like a social or psychological analysis of why people have a tendency to join cults and what makes them so appealing. It's not really that. It really is just it's biographical almost in a lot of ways. And so I think a lot of people are going to go into this expecting kind of like a analysis of what motivates people to go to join cults. And I feel like we're getting more of analysis of what drove some of these people to become cult leaders, which is also interesting. But I think that naming is a tad bit misleading. But I'm 20% into this one. I have 12 hours left. I probably will finish this one by the end of the week. I don't know what else. I mean, outside of the MT Con book, I think that's probably all that I'm going to get done. Audiobook wise, I was doing the 31 and 31. Let's be real. I have read, let's see how many volumes. So I've read 11 volumes. Today's the 25th. I'm 14 volumes behind. Let's do the math on this because I just feel like I might be able to do this, but then I don't. And so I would need to read at least 2 to 3 volumes a day, which is doable. It's doable, but we shall see. So I'm definitely going to be finishing Psalm 100. I may pick something that's less text heavy than Dr. Stone, but we'll see how that goes, because I definitely have like shortcake cake. Like, this one is not super text heavy, and so I think something like this would be, you know, easier to read. But no rush. If I do it, I do it. If I don't, I don't. But let me go ahead and go so I can get my workout in and get ready for bed, get ready for tomorrow. I will check in with y'all later. Deuces. Okay, so I'm extremely tired and I'm getting slightly congested, which is never fun, but I just did sprints with my patrons. We started at 8:30 and we sprinted for a little while, for about 3 hours, so that was fun. I just wanted to come in and update y'all. I finished Zom 100 Volume 2. This is such a silly series. I mean, in this one, I think maybe I talked about the first half where he wants to wine and dine these flight attendants, and he does that. And then in the second half of this, he wants to be a superhero, and he kind of does that. And so there is another character she's introduced in the first volume, and she's trying to reiterate, like, she's a risk analyst. She's a risk analyst, and so she basically is saying, like, you have to calculate how much risk it is in order to, like, save people or do certain things or whatever the case may be, because he's just not mindful of stuff like that, and she is, and she's like, that becomes like a matter of life and death if you don't calculate the risk of things that you're doing. So it's an interesting series. I am glad that I'm checking it out from the library and that the library has made the decision to purchase these, because this is not one that I think I would want to end up collecting, although I am somewhat enjoying these volumes. I can't decide if I want to give this one a 3.5 or a 4-star. I will decide whenever I sit down to write my review. I also started Fire in His Fingertips. A flirty fireman ravishes me with his smoldering gaze. This is by Kawano Tanishi. This is nothing but smut. I knew that it was going to be nothing but smut because Shay has said over and over again that this is nothing but smut. And so I think Izzy has read this one as well. And so I knew that going in. But y'all, I did not know, speaking directly to Shay and Izzy on this, I did not know that it was going to be smut that quick, which is fine with me. I don't have a problem with it. It's like literally 10 pages in and it's straight smut. And so that's fine. I am enjoying this one. I am not, as you can see, I'm really not that far into it. I also, during the sprints, I actually worked out during the sprints and took a shower and everything, got ready for bed, because when we finished the sprints, I wanted to be like, I could get in the bed and be done for the night. So especially because I sound like this. So I did listen to Cults a little bit more. I've pretty much been listening to that all day today since I've been at work. I've been listening to Cults, and I listened to a little bit more of it while we were doing the sprints. And Cults it's something else. There were cult leaders that I'm very familiar with, others that I'm not. One of the things that I've been talking about, like, during the sprints is that they definitely have, like, the men who are leading the cults, they definitely all have something in common. And that is this hyperfixation with sex. And not sex in, I think, a healthy way, but sex in a way that is used for control. It's grotesque. It is manipulation. It's also pedophilia. And so, but they all seemingly have this in common. And so the last thing that I listened to was about the Waco raids with, I can't even remember the guy's name right now, but if you look up the Waco raids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I just finished up the section about him, and now we are in the section about Nexium, which I know a little bit about Nexium. and they are going into, I forget the cult leader's name for NXIVM, but they're going into his background and stuff. And I love that they already touched on the fact that NXIVM, it was people found themselves wrapped up in NXIVM, not even realizing that it was a cult. And I think for me personally, NXIVM is one of the few cults where I don't have to remind myself the psychology of dealing with like a narcissist and the manipulation that goes on. I think with NXIVM, the way that it was set up, because it's multi-level marketing and it's meant to very much so attract women, but it was multi-level marketing in a way that was about self-improvement. And so the tenets that they use, or the whole foundation of it, is low-key very appealing. And so it's very fascinating thinking about the fact that I can see why a lot of people got caught up in NXIVM and not realizing that NXIVM was on a whole different level than what they probably anticipated. So I appreciated that they did bring that up. I felt validated by that. And so I may read a little bit more of Fire in His Fingertips before I go to sleep. I need to decide whether I'm going to... I don't want to go to sleep listening to cults, because I just feel like dream-wise, I often dream about what I hear last. Not always, but a lot of times I do. So I have to be very mindful of what I'm listening to before I go to sleep. So I think I'm... for bed, to help me go to sleep, I probably will listen to something a little bit lighter. I haven't decided what that will be yet, but hopefully something lighter. But all right, y'all, that's it for today. Deuces. I will talk to y'all in the morning, because ain't no way I'm checking it again tonight. I'm too tired, y'all. Way too tired. Okay, y'all, so this was one of those weeks where I really just did not, I didn't update. I didn't update, not because I didn't want to update, I just had a lot going on. So you see a lot of B-roll footage. This is probably like the third time that maybe I talk in this week's recent reads, and you know, some weeks is probably gonna be like this, and with this month it probably is going to be more like this than it's ever been. But I just wanted to come in really quick and do a final check-in for what I did end up reading. So I did talk about Psalm 100 volume 2, which was the primary thing that I think the last thing that I really talked about. Since then, I have finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe around 6 books. So the first thing that I ended up finishing was Cults Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups, and understanding the people who join them. I feel like I did talk about this one a little bit, but I did end up finishing it. I haven't written my review for it yet, but it's about a 3.5 star read. So it is a look at cults, and I think I said in the opening clip that this is kind of misleading in some ways, because of the fact that we will have this presumption that it actually talks heavily about how people get involved with cults, and honestly it doesn't. It does not talk about that a lot at all. It mainly focuses on the history of the cult, how the cult comes to be, and it does an extensive analysis of the leaders of the cults, but not a in-depth discussion of why people join cults and the sociology and psychology behind it. It delves into it a little bit, like some traits that exist in cult leaders that they then kind of use tactically to draw people in. But it wasn't enough of that it wasn't enough of that deep dive enough for me. And sometimes it does read a little bit like a Wikipedia page or an encyclopedia. So there's that. And I'm not saying that it's not well worth a read, because I definitely learned some things about some cults that I didn't know. But if you are already into cults and you know a lot about cults, I don't know if this necessarily provides anything that's exceptionally new or something that's going to be like riveting to you as a reader. That solely depends. I think that's solely going to depend upon you and your experience in reading it. But I mean, like I said, some of these individuals I was already familiar with, like Nexium, Jonestown, the Manson family, like, so there were a handful. Oh, and I always forget the name of the guy, but it was the Waco standoff, that cult. And so some of that stuff I already knew. Some stuff I learned a little bit more about in terms of details and the guys behind the cult. But for the most part, I don't feel like I necessarily got anything that was like drastically new out of the situation. So there was that. Like I said, that was probably about 3.5 stars. I then went on a kind of an Audible type of listen. So with Audible Plus, I was just looking at like what they had, just randomly, like, okay, well, what do y'all have that is interesting? And so I ended up reading 2 books, which should have been by Alexandria House, which I wish this was longer. It was very, very short. The audiobook was like an hour and a half, if that. And the actual physical book of it, I think, is only like 55 pages. But it is kind of like a second chance romance that's done in flashbacks. I will say that this one does have cheating elements and also themes related to abuse. The abuse doesn't happen on page, but you do hear a character extensively talking about how he abuses our heroine, so that is something to be mindful of. Both characters are in horrible like relationships. Both of them are, but for some people I know that that's not going to be justification for the infidelity. So that is, you know, just if that's not your mileage, completely understandable. I think I'm going to end up giving this one 3 stars. I think that this one should have been longer, because we were getting a pretty complex story in terms of what our heroine had gone through in terms of the physical abuse and how the two of them were connected in the relationship that they shared. And there's this thing that kind of happens towards the end of the book, and I was like, I wish that that was explored more. I wish we got a bigger background on our hero. And so I think that this had potential to set up to be like a great Alexandria House book if it was longer. So it's not my favorite of hers, but still a solid like 3-star read. 16 on the Block by Baby Girl Daniels for me was definitely a YA/teen version of street lit. It definitely reminded me of some of those earlier books that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, which were like street lit for a teen based audience. So definitely the grit that we typically see in street lit, but also toned down in terms of content. And so 16 on the Block focuses on a main character who is struggling with family dynamics. She has lost her family, like her mom has passed, and she gets put into the foster care system. Her sister eventually comes and gets her out, but her sister is connected to a guy that's not the greatest guy in the world, definitely involved in some underworld type of things that it's rough, and her sister's trying to make a life for herself and for her sister and give her the best. There are some pretty tragic things that end up happening throughout the duration of this book, and so our main character has to figure out how to navigate those things, all while being a teenager and making friends. Some of the friends not as great as they could be, love interest, etc. I think that this one definitely fell short in the length. I think that it could have been longer because we needed a little bit more character exploration. I think that the plot was okay, but I feel like it did hit some pitfalls of not being well thought out of in every circumstance, and our characters felt a little one-dimensional in some ways, especially our side characters. I don't think that they were super developed. I also had a issue with how the narrative changed. So basically we were getting multiple perspectives without really it being a consistent perspective change. Like, we got our main character's perspective, we got some of the friends' perspectives, her sister's perspective, the love interest perspective. And so I think that you have to be careful with that, because when you're doing multiple perspectives, multiple POVs in a book, you have to make sure that you are not just doing it for the sake of doing it, and you're not skimming over details, so your characters don't come back feeling one-dimensional. And so that's what ends up happening, is that the characters end up being one-dimensional because the POVs weren't developed enough. And so I understood kind of like the intention behind it. The delivery overall just was not great. So but I mean, it was one of those reads where it was like, you know, a popcorn read where like I enjoyed it, but I wasn't looking for any type of like the next great read of all time. So that was about a 3-star read for me too. And then I ended up reading 2 books, which I'm going to save these for last. I read 2 books that were my most disappointing and worst reads of the month, unfortunately. So the next thing that I ended up finishing is I'm going through and I'm reading some of DC's like New 52 stuff, which I've been meaning to do this for a while and I haven't done it. So this is my process of doing it now. I'm going through and I'm reading DC's New 52 stuff. I decided to start off with the kind of Court of Owls trilogy that Snyder did, the first 3 in the New 52 Batman. And so some people find it very, very intriguing, some of the best Batman writing. I have yet to decide, considering I've only read volume 1, which is Batman volume 1, The Court of Owls. This is interesting because Scott Snyder takes a different approach to Batman, in that Batman gets broken down. Scott Snyder kind of flips Batman on his head and uses his arrogance against him. So there are some mysterious murders that have been happening in Gotham, and they seem to be the sign of the infamous Court of Owls, which is tied to a childhood rhyme about how they watch you, you know, be mindful when you get their sign, because that means that that's their order of death. And so there are people who have been very indicative of, their deaths have been very indicative that the Court of Owls does exist. And so Batman's like, no, they don't. This is just a childhood, like, you know, rhyme. Y'all are not about to scare me. You're not about to, you know, make me feel fearful, yada, yada, yada. And so he's kind of arrogant about it. And I think that he does the necessary investigative work in order to try to prove that they don't exist, but his arrogance makes him not thorough. And some people may feel like this kind of out of character for Batman, but I think I am a comic book reader that likes when writers are able to deconstruct the actual comic book character and give us a more human view of them, because at the end of the day, they're superheroes. So even as readers, we kind of put them on this pedestal of being all-knowing and being very you know, powerful, and they just never fail. They're always successful. And in this one, we get a version of Batman where he is very, very flawed, very, very arrogant. His ego gets in the way, and he's not as thorough because he doesn't want to listen to everyone. There is a scene that I think is very controversial for some people that involves Dick Grayson, and I believe it's Dick Grayson. So I think we meet Tim, Dick, and Damian are all in this, and I can't remember off the top of my head, y'all, this is so sad. I can't remember if he slapped Damian or if he slapped Tim or Dick, and I feel like it was Dick Grayson that he ended up slapping, but I could also be, yeah, he did slap Dick Grayson. And so I think that was interesting that we did get to see Tim, Dick, and Damian at the same time, because they all have essentially played some form of Robin at some point. And so having them there as his counterparts, his alternate like view in terms of like his mind. And I'm sorry, y'all, with all the cooking, my neighbor is so loud, like so loud. But I think that it's interesting that we get an incorporation of the 3 of them, but there is this point where he does get into physical altercation with Dick. Not really, he just slaps the shit out of him. And so that took some people out of the story, which I get, and I understand why it would take anyone out of the story, but I also understand why Batman did it. It doesn't make it right, I just understand why he did it. But the cool thing about this comic is that it is very weird structurally. So there's a point where Batman is kind of losing his mind, and so the comic no longer reads like, you know, like flipping the pages from left to right. It doesn't read that way anymore. You kind of have to like flip it on the side or turn it upside down, and the artwork becomes more chaotic as we explore him being lost in this space and losing his mind and basically being tortured. You two start to get confused, and it becomes a very chaotic read because that's how Batman is in that moment, and they break him. And so it was a very powerful read when it's all said and done. I could see why people look at this trilogy, like these very first 3 volumes of New 52 Batman, as being very epic in a lot of ways, because essentially it is. I mean, and just in this first volume that I've read, it's very intriguing. It's very, 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 oh gosh, y'all. It's very complex, and it is very much so a different way of analyzing and looking at Bruce Wayne. But I enjoyed it. This was like a 4-star read for me. I didn't quite feel like it was 5-star because I wasn't always in tune with the story itself, but it was a 4-star read for me, and I definitely have the second volume checked out from KU. I think that this may be one that I may consider adding to a repertoire for the Realm of Comics Book Club. I think that this will be a good way to introduce people to a little bit of Batman. I haven't 100% decided yet. I think I'm going to read the trilogy, probably finish the trilogy out in August, see how I feel, and then maybe think about introducing it to the comic book club next year. So yeah, sorry that was so long. I think that was just probably one of the most complex reads, and it honestly, you know, it was one of my favorite reads for the month of July because of its complexity. But the other 2 things that I ended up reading was, oh my god, this is by Stephanie Cook and Insha Fitzpatrick, and the art's by Juliana Moon. I checked this out because, one, I read also, if you did not know, a lot of middle grade graphic novels, and I thought that this was going to be intriguing because I'm thinking like, okay, here we have, you know, a middle grade graphic novel, checkbox. Greek gods and goddesses, checkbox. Girl secretly finds out that she is the daughter of Zeus, checkbox. And it was not good. This was not a good read at all. This was like a 2-star read for me. I did not like this at all. And I'm not the target audience, and it's not about target audience things. It's the writing was, even for a middle grade graphic novel, it has nothing to do with simplicity. The writing just was not good in this. And it was really redundant in some areas. I think that there's this line that Zeus says where daughter, like every time he ends something, everyone should take breakfast seriously, daughter. Come with me, daughter. Like, it's ridiculous how many times it is impossible to rule out the possibility, daughter. Like, he just excessively said daughter. It was just too much. It was just too much. Then there was some plot issues here where our main character, Karen, so she gets sent to Mount Olympus, and she doesn't really have the best relationship with her dad. She lives primarily with her mother. Her mother and her father are no longer together, so we have that demigod type of thing going on. And so she primarily, like I said, lives with her mother. And it was weird, y'all, because of the simple fact that she gets to the school. It is clear as day that The other kids in the school are are gods and goddesses. Their names, their powers, whatever. And it's like Karen's just like, I don't understand why everybody's so weird. This doesn't make sense. I don't understand why everybody's so weird. This is weird. This is weird. And I'm like, girl, what? Like, it really does. I saw a review that really encompassed everything that I wanted to say about this. This book treats kids as if they've never heard about Greek mythology and they've never heard of Percy Jackson. Now, while that's a possibility, a lot of kids that end up picking up Greek mythology related things that have an affinity for mythology have heard of Percy Jackson. And I'm not saying that everything has to be about Percy. Everything that's Greek mythology related for middle grade has to tie back to Greek. It doesn't. My issue with this is that it treats kids as if they're dumb. And I can't stand books that essentially feel like they're talking down to kids, or kids don't have enough working knowledge to figure certain things out. So I struggled with this one a lot. I really struggled. I did not like this one at all. I think the mystery element with Medusa was dumb. Like, I have not read a middle grade book in a long time where I have felt like this was just not target audience or not. This was not a good book. So I will not be picking up volume 2. I don't have any interest in reading volume 2 at this point. I got this because I was like, oh, I want to give this a shot. This is probably interesting. And it ended up being a complete failure. So there was that. And then before I finished that one, I ended up reading The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I am at the point where I never want to read a book by that man again. I just don't think that Riley Sager is the author for me. Like, I now am 2 for 2 with this man. 2 of his books I love, Lock Every Door and Home Before Dark. Love those 2. The last 2 that he's done, which is The House Across the Lake, and what is the one that he did before The House Across the Lake? Whatever that book is, that I also didn't like. I talked about that with Lala and Brie. Oh man, I did not like that one either. If I could remember the name of it, I just don't know. And it was interesting because we talk about that, like, Lala didn't really care for Final Girl till the last time I lied, and I don't think that I will either, because we like the same 2 and dislike. Well, we like those 2. We both like those 2. We both dislike Survive the Night. And I'm interested to see if Lala's Literary Dead Book Club is talking about The House Across the Lake this upcoming weekend. And I'm interested to see how she feels about it, because I didn't like it. So I did not like Survive the Night, and I did not like The House. It's so dumb, and it's so hard to talk about this book without spoiling anything. It is a 2-star read for me. It literally uses some of the most common tropes in mysteries and thrillers. You have a main character who is an alcoholic who watches her famous superstar neighbor across the lake, and so there's that spying neighbor type of element that we see all the time. I didn't like the audiobook narrator. The audiobook narrator sounded as if she was in her 50s or 60s, so I'm thinking that we have an older character. Imagine my surprise when I come to find out that the main character is like in her 30s. Awful narrator choice. Did not work well at all. And my biggest gripe with Riley Sager is always going to be this: he likes to write unreliable narrators. Okay? But I think he just doesn't do it well, because I feel like when he writes in first person and he withholds information, he doesn't do it in a way that makes me feel like the character is unreliable. And in this case, I think he was trying to use the alcohol as an to create an unreliable type of circumstance. But then his use of alcoholism was, I didn't like either, because it was very like, oh, you can be an alcoholic and then you instantly can not be an alcoholic. Or it was kind of like, it was turn it on, turn it off. Or like, she would be drinking all this alcohol, and all of a sudden she's going out to the lake in choppy weather, functioning with a whole boat. Like, that makes no sense. So to me, that was like, that's not even logical. So then I'm like, okay, this just, none of this makes sense. And then I don't like that with the way he withholds information in a first person narrative just doesn't work for me, because it never makes sense as to why they withhold that information when it becomes such a big part of the character development and the plot development. Like, why would you withhold this information, make it, and then use it as a plot device? It doesn't make sense. I'm reading from their perspective. Why are you withholding this information? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, there's got to be a better way for him to create an unreliable narrator outside of writing in first person and withholding information, because he doesn't do it well and it never reads as though it makes sense. So it was just that. The plot twist all of them were stupid. Every single one of them were stupid. I hated every single plot twist. There's one plot twist that he used in this book that should have been used in Home Before Dark. It would have made more sense to take that plot twist and use it in Home Before Dark, because it fit better with that book thematically. It was no indication that that plot twist was coming. What I mean by no indication, because you're like, oh, well, plot twist. No. If you read this book and you get that plot twist, you'll be like, what? It's out of left field. It's so out. There's no possibility. If you go back and you read that book, there's no possibility that that would even be a thing. Literally one mention of it in the beginning that's not even fully developed, really. It's literally probably part of a paragraph, and you take that one thing and make it a whole plot thing at the end. It was it wasn't good, y'all. I'm sorry. For the people who like Riley Sager, I apologize, but this one was just, it wasn't good, y'all. It wasn't good. It was unfortunate. So that's how I feel about that one. 2-star read. One of my worst books in 2022. Worst book of July. It just was not a good read. All right, y'all. So honestly, that's it. I have talked enough in this final clip to kind of wrap up everything that happened this week. So this is probably genuinely going to be a shorter one, because I didn't really check in that much. It's just like the third check-in out of this whole thing, but it was a busy week, and sometimes that happens. But as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content, click the subscribe button, hit bell for notifications, and I will be back with another recent read soon.